If you're here to beg, go home, Mom hissed. Then the brass chain slid across the door. I was still on the porch in the snow when a black town car stopped at the curb. The man everyone swore was dead stepped out with a cane and a ledger. He studied my face like a contract he'd written years ago. "Tell me," he said, "who's been spending my money with your name?" "My name is Vivian Long. I am 32 years old, and I am a communications strategist for Northline Strategies. My job consists of managing corporate reputations, anticipating crises before they happen, and spinning disasters into acceptable narratives. I spend 50 weeks of the year in Denver, solving problems for other people. The other 2 weeks, I am expected to return to Cedar Ridge, Colorado, and pretend I do not see the problem simmering right in front of me. This Christmas Eve, the air felt different. The drive from Denver had been a 2-hour battle against black ice and blowing snow. Cedar Ridge is not a destination. It is a place people get trapped in. The town itself huddles in a high-altitude valley, picturesque from a distance, suffocating up close. As I guided the rental SUV onto the unplowed streets of my childhood neighborhood, my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The car's heater was blasting, but I felt a familiar, creeping cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. On the passenger seat, almost glowing in the twilight, sat a plain white business envelope. It was not a Christmas card. It was a collection. It held the itemized receipts and payment confirmations for a year's worth of my mother's medical bills, the trips to the specialist in Boulder, the prescription copays, the charges for holistic therapies that were really just weekend spa treatments with a thin medical justification. My mother, Diane, had never explicitly asked me to pay these. She operated in a more insidious way. She would accidentally forward the past due emails to my inbox, always with a subject line like, "Oh dear, look at this mess." Or she would call me, her voice trembling, complaining about the cost of her deductible, a deductible that existed only because she insisted on the platinum level plan. I always paid. I paid to stop the calls. I paid to avoid the guilt-laced follow-ups. I paid to maintain the fragile transactional piece that we called a mother-daughter relationship. I never asked for the money back. But this year was different. This year, the payments had nearly doubled, and the accidental forwards had become a weekly occurrence. Tonight, I was not asking for repayment. I just wanted her to look at the envelope. I wanted her to acknowledge, just once, the weight of what I was carrying for her. I parked at the curb of the house I grew up in. It was blazing with light, every window lit, a perfect portrait of holiday cheer against the deep blue snowscape. The oversized inflatable snowman on the lawn looked obscene. I could hear music from the car, a thumping bass line laid over some cheerful pop Christmas song. I grabbed the envelope, took a deep breath of the thin, freezing air, and stepped out of the car. My boots, expensive leather and practical for a Denver winter, sank into the 6 inches of fresh powder on the walkway. Someone, probably my sister's new boyfriend, had done a terrible job shoveling. I climbed the porch steps. A perfect magazine-worthy wreath hung on the oak door, tied with a massive burlap bow. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, I could see shadows moving, blurred and frantic. I heard a shriek of laughter, high-pitched and familiar. That was my sister. "Brittany." I rang the doorbell. The music volume dropped instantly. The shadows froze. I heard footsteps, quick and light, approaching the door. The door opened, but only a few inches. It was stopped short by the heavy, glaringly gold security chain. My mother, Diane, filled the gap. Her hair, a shade of blonde too bright for a woman her age, was perfectly styled. Her makeup was a mask of festive precision. She wore a deep red cashmere sweater that I knew, from a catalog I'd thrown away. Cost more than my first car payment. Her eyes, cold and assessing, met mine. There was no flicker of welcome, no "Merry Christmas, Vivian." Her gaze dropped instantly to the white envelope in my gloved hand. A faint sneer, almost imperceptible, touched her lips. Behind her, in the slice of the living room visible through the gap, the scene was aggressively cheerful. The Christmas tree was enormous, professionally decorated in white and gold, glittering so brightly it hurt to look at. I saw Brittany, 24 and perpetually irresponsible, flit past the opening. She was holding her hand out, waggling her fingers. "Isn't it gorgeous, babe?" she squealed. Not to me, but to someone I could not see. He just gets me. A man's arm, clad in a new-looking flannel shirt, wrapped around her waist, Brittany's boyfriend. She flashed the new, delicate gold bracelet on her wrist. Diane's attention snapped back to me, her face hardening. "If you're here to beg, go home," she hissed. The words were quiet, ejected with venom, meant only for me. Beg. The envelope in my hand represented nearly $20,000 of her paid-off debts. "Mom, I'm not begging," I said, my voice sounding weak in the cold. "I just wanted to drop this off. I just wanted to talk. This house," she cut me off, her voice suddenly loud enough for those inside to hear, for the neighbors to hear if they were listening, "is for family who listen. This house is for family who know their place and respect their mother." Before I could form a response, before I could even register the full impact of the insult, the door closed. It was not a slam. It was a quiet, definitive click, a sound of finality. And then, puncturing the silence, the sharp, metallic shh of the brass chain sliding back into its locked track. I stood there. I was alone on the porch, in the dark, on Christmas Eve. The snow, which had been a gentle flurry, now felt like a weighted blanket, gathering on my shoulders, melting into my hair. The humiliation was a hot, acidic burn in my throat. I could feel my fingers, even inside my gloves, going numb. From inside the house, the music swelled again. The laughter resumed, louder this time. They had already forgotten me. Fine, I had tried. I had fulfilled my obligation. I turned my back to the door. The wreath, the laughter. I would get back in the rental. I would drive the 2 hours back to Denver, find an open hotel bar, and charge a bottle of overpriced wine to my room. I took one step off the porch, my boot crunching on the packed ice beneath the snow. A sharp, rattling sound made me flinch. The cheap tin wind chimes Diane kept hanging by the garage were clattering violently, but the air was suddenly still. It was not the wind. It was a change in the air pressure. At the same time, a brilliant white light sliced across the front yard, sweeping over the inflatable snowman and illuminating me in a harsh, theatrical spotlight. Headlights. They pinned me against the backdrop of the house. A vehicle had pulled up to the curb, right behind my rental. It was long, black, and polished to a mirror shine despite the snow. It was a Lincoln town car, the kind that implied serious money, the kind you never, ever saw in Cedar Ridge. The engine was a low, powerful purr, barely audible. The driver's door remained closed. The rear passenger door opened. A single, polished black wingtip shoe planted itself in the snow at the curb. Then a leg, clad in dark, pinstriped wool. A man unfolded himself from the car, moving with a slow, deliberate grace that seemed to defy the slippery conditions. He was tall. He wore a heavy charcoal gray wool overcoat with a velvet collar, and he held a thick, dark wooden cane with a silver head. He stepped fully onto the sidewalk and looked up. The porch light, which had made me feel so exposed, now caught his face. He had a full, impeccably trimmed silver-white beard. His eyes, even from this distance, looked sharp. My heart did not just stop. It felt as if it had been seized by an icy hand. I knew that face. I knew that posture. But it was impossible. Harlan Whitaker, my grandfather. Harlan Whitaker was dead. He had died in a supposed boating accident off the Cayman Islands when I was in high school. That was the story Diane had told. No body, no funeral. Just a very quiet, very fast probate, after which Diane had stopped working and Brittany had started getting everything she ever asked for, even as Diane complained that Harlan had left them nothing but debts and complications. The music inside the house cut off. The abrupt silence was deafening. The curtain on the front picture window twitched. I heard a muffled, terrified gasp through the thick oak door. "He's alive." It was Brittany's voice, stripped of all its earlier glee, now just a reedy, terrified whisper. I heard a metallic rattle from the doorway, the clinking of the chain. I looked back at the door, at the peephole, now a dark, cyclopean eye. I could picture Diane on the other side, her perfectly made-up face pale, her hand shaking as it hovered over the deadbolt. My grandfather, my supposedly dead grandfather, paid no attention to the house. He paid no attention to me. He walked calmly, steadily up the shoved path. The heavy thud of his cane on the stone, followed by the crunch of his shoes in the snow, was the only sound in the world. Thud, crunch, thud, crunch. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, just 5 feet away from me. He stared past me, his gaze fixed on the center of the oak door. His voice, when it came, was exactly as I remembered it, deep, gravelly, and saturated with an authority that permitted no argument. "I hear," he said, his voice carrying easily in the frozen air. "There is an accounting tonight." I was paralyzed. I was a statue on the lawn, the envelope of medical bills still clutched in my frozen hand. The snow on my shoulders was now a thick, cold mantle. I could not feel my feet. I could not feel my face. My breath fogged in front of me. A cloud of disbelief. The world had just cracked open, and then, in the profound, icy silence that followed his words, my phone vibrated in my coat pocket. The buzz was sharp, insistent, and shocking. I pulled it out. My gloved fingers fumbled with the screen, smearing the snow. It was a text alert, a high-priority security notification from my bank, the one tied to my executive accounts at Northline. I read the words, but my brain struggled to assemble them. Security alert. A new titling transaction has been recorded associated with your name. An entity, Long Household Emergency Fund, has been linked to a UCC-1 filing against Northline Strategies assets. It was gibberish. A UCC-1. That was a commercial lien. A way to secure a loan using property against Northline's assets. Linked to my name. And Long Household Emergency Fund. That was the name of the joint account Diane had pressured me into opening with her years ago, the one I only ever put money into. I looked up from the glowing screen, my mind reeling, trying to connect the impossible man on the steps with the impossible message on my phone. Harlan Whitaker had turned. He was no longer looking at the door. He was looking directly at me, his eyes a sharp, piercing blue I had forgotten locked onto mine. He had seen the phone. He had seen the blood drain from my face. He tilted his head, his silver beard stark against his dark coat. He studied my face, not with the warmth of a long-lost grandfather, but like a master auditor who had just found the critical error in a fraudulent ledger. "You're the one," he said, his voice quiet but cutting through the snow-filled air. "You are the one they have been using the most." I did not go inside. I did not wait for the chain to be unlatched. Harlan Whitaker stood on the steps, a ghost of audits past, and the bank alert was burning a hole in my digital life. I turned from the house, from the man who was supposed to be dead, and from the family who wished I was. I walked past the black town car, got into my own, and drove. I drove the 2 hours back to Denver. I did not listen to music. I did not stop for coffee. I drove fueled by a cold, crystalline rage that was more potent than any caffeine. The snowstorm chased me down the highway, but the real blizzard was on my phone. By the time I walked into my sterile, quiet apartment overlooking the city, Christmas Eve was a memory. The war had begun. I did not take off my coat. I went straight to my home office, to the triple monitors where I managed the narratives of billion-dollar corporations. Tonight, I was managing my own. The bank alert was the starting point. It was a thread. I pulled. It took me deep into the secured document portal of my private bank. This was not the consumer side. It was the wealth management side I used for my Northline bonuses. There, in a queue marked pending authorizations, were 2 documents I had never seen. The first was a simple cosign application for a supplementary executive credit card. It had been initiated 6 months ago. The second, buried deeper, was the mechanism that allowed the first, a durable power of attorney, a POA. My blood ran cold. It was dated 8 years ago, right after I got my first major promotion at Northline. I stared at the screen, trying to remember. Had I signed this? Diane had mentioned it. Just in case, darling, if you're traveling for work and I need to handle your mail. I never would have signed a durable POA. That was for the incapacitated. I zoomed in on the signature. It was electronic. It was a perfect vectorized image of my own handwriting. It was the signature they had lifted from the house title documents I signed when I helped Diane refinance her mortgage 5 years ago. It was clean. It was fraudulent. And it was active. That POA was the key they had used to unlock my entire professional life. It was the authorization for the bank alert that had just arrived tonight, the one that had stopped my heart on the porch, the UCC-1 filing. My job requires me to understand the language of power. A UCC-1, a Uniform Commercial Code filing, is the language of debt. It is a public declaration that someone has a lien on your assets. It secures a loan. If you default, they take the assets. I went to the Colorado Secretary of State website. I searched my name. There it was. Debtor Vivian Long. Secured party. A Scottsdale-based private lending group. The filing was 3 days old. My fingers were numb as I clicked to open the collateral agreement. What had they pledged? All office furnishings, electronics, and intellectual property assets associated with Vivian Long at Northline Strategies. I read it twice. I read it a third time. It was insane. It was a fantasy. It was also, if left unchallenged, legally binding. They had taken out a high-interest loan against my career, against my desk, my corporate laptop, my bonus structure, and by implication, my reputation. They had put a commercial lien on my name. The loan, the one I supposedly now owed, had been dispersed to one account. I knew the name. It was the one from the bank alert, the Long Household Emergency Fund. This account, I had access to. It was the joint account Diane had guilted me into opening years ago. For the house, she'd said. For emergencies. I was the only one who ever deposited. She was the only one who withdrew. I logged in. The history was not a history of emergencies. It was a ledger of luxuries. It was a systematic bleed, cash withdrawals, always at the end of the month, always just under the $10,000 federal reporting threshold, charges from high-end boutiques in Aspen, spa treatment packages in Scottsdale, Arizona. The memo lines, written by Diane, were almost comical in their audacity. Family gifts, household maintenance, required travel for health. That bracelet Brittany had been flashing through the gap in the door. I saw the charge from a private jeweler in Cherry Creek, dated 2 weeks ago. My sister was wearing a Christmas present financed by a fraudulent lien against my job. My mind rewound. Snapping past the fog of familial obligation, I saw all the little requests. Brittany, crying in her car. Viv, my credit is just trashed. Can I please just use your name for the new phone plan? I'll pay you back. I swear. Diane, on the phone. I don't understand these new online forms for the insurance. I'll just add your name as a secondary contact so you can handle the complicated stuff. It was not chaos. It was a conspiracy. I was not the successful daughter. I was the primary asset. I was the mark. And then I thought of Harlan. I hear there is an accounting tonight. He knew. His reappearance, on the exact night this UCC-1 filing was triggered, was not a coincidence. I went to my encrypted drive, the one I kept locked in a digital vault. I navigated to a folder labeled Family Archived. Inside was a single PDF, a poor quality scan that Diane had accidentally emailed to me years ago. She had been trying to prove how Harlan had abandoned her, how he'd left them with nothing. I opened it. The Whitaker Living Trust, executed 1998. My grandfather, Harlan Whitaker, was the grantor. The beneficiaries were his daughter, Diane, and her living issue, me and Brittany. I remembered scanning it briefly then. thinking it was just boilerplate. But tonight, I was not a daughter. I was a strategist. I read the clauses. He had structured the trust with surgical precision. It was designed to distribute income, not principal, and it contained a stipulation I had overlooked. Article 4, Section 2. Distributions were conditional. They were available only to beneficiaries who were self-sufficient, gainfully employed, and not demonstrably dependent on the charity or assets of others. It was an independence clause, a test, one I had passed, and one Diane and Brittany had apparently failed spectacularly. But that was not the file that mattered. There was another attachment, a 2-page addendum. It was dated 2008. This was 2 years after his supposed death. The signature was notarized in the Cayman Islands. He had not been dead. He had been watching. This addendum was a clawback provision. The legalese was dense, but the intent was brutal. Should any beneficiary, or any agent acting on behalf of a beneficiary, utilize fraudulent means, identity theft, forged co-signature, or undue influence to access, attach, or encumber the assets of another beneficiary. My pulse hammered. All rights to inheritance, distribution, or trusteeship for the offending beneficiary shall be immediately and irrevocably frozen, pending a full audit by the grantor or his appointed agent. He had predicted this. He had written the trap into the trust itself. The UCC-1 filing, the POA, they were not just stealing from me, they were stealing from a fellow beneficiary. They had triggered the clawback. The last piece, the UCC-1 filing. How did they get my Northline information, my internal employee ID, my asset list? I logged into my Northline Strategies corporate portal. As a senior strategist, I had security clearance to review my own data logs. I checked my HR file. My heart stopped. A request, dated 3 weeks ago. Request for corporate supplementary card family. The system had automatically blocked it. Northline's security was too tight. A request for a family card on a senior executive account had tripped an immediate deny flag, but the request had been populated. And to populate it, the user had to upload identification. I clicked the attachment. It was a high-resolution scan of my driver's license. The emergency copy I kept in the top drawer of my old childhood desk at Diane's house. The Northline system logged everything. I ran an IP trace on the origin of the failed request. The digital signature was unmistakable. The IP address terminated at my mother's house in Cedar Ridge. I sat back in my chair. The sun was not yet up. The city lights glittered like cold diamonds. The shock was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the work. I was a strategist. This was a crisis, and I knew exactly how to write the narrative. I opened a new, blank document. I created a new, encrypted folder. I saved the bank alerts. I saved the PDF of the fraudulent power of attorney. I saved the e-signature's metadata. I saved the public filing of the UCC-1 highlighting the collateral description. I exported the entire transaction history from the long household emergency fund. I took a screenshot of the IP trace log from the Northline portal. I cross-referenced the dates of the luxury purchases with Brittany's public Instagram feed, saving screenshots of her posing in Aspen, tagged in Scottsdale. I compiled a list of every phone bill, every insurance payment, every medical copay I had ever made on their behalf. I found the emails from Brittany. Just need your name, Viv, promise to pay you back. I was building a file, a case, my own private ledger. This was not for a court of law. Not yet. This was for me. This was the version of the story I would need. I typed a title on the cover page. I called it, For When They Forget. I drove back to Cedar Ridge on the 26th of December. The sky was a brilliant, unforgiving blue. I had not slept. I had only cataloged. My phone contained the encrypted file I had built, the one titled, For When They Forget. I was no longer the daughter returning home to beg for acceptance. I was the chief strategist for Northline, walking into a hostile negotiation I had been preparing for my entire life. Harlan had called me at 6 a.m. One ring, I answered. The audit is at 10, he had said, and hung up. He did not need to specify the location. When I arrived, the black town car was parked in the driveway, a sleek predator in the snow. The inflatable snowman was gone. I used my old key. I did not knock. The scene in the living room was a twisted parody of Christmas. The magnificent tree was still lit, but its glow seemed sickly in the bright morning light. Empty coffee mugs littered the end tables. My mother, Diane, sat on the sofa, her festive red sweater now looking rumpled. She was trying to look bored, but a nerve jumped in her eyelid. Brittany was slouched in an armchair, scrolling furiously on her phone, radiating resentment. And in my father's old wingback chair, at the head of the room, as if it were a boardroom, sat Harlan Whitaker. He was dressed as impeccably as he had been on Christmas Eve, in a tweed jacket and wool trousers. His cane rested against the chair. On the walnut coffee table in front of him, the festive decorations had been pushed aside. In their place sat a stack of red holiday-themed envelopes, a worn leather-bound ledger, and the single white envelope I had dropped on the porch. Harlan had retrieved it. "Sit, Vivian," he said, not looking up from the ledger. I took the armchair opposite Brittany. The air crackled. The only sound was the frantic tap-tap-tap of Brittany's nails on her phone screen. Harlan looked at Diane. "The pretense is over." Diane's demeanor, practiced over a lifetime, snapped into place. She became the victim. Her voice, which had been hissing venom at me 2 nights prior, now dripped with a saccharine, wounded sweetness. "Daddy," she began, the word daddy sounding obscene. "I do not know what this is about. This is a family matter. Vivian has always been difficult." She turned on me, her eyes flashing. "To show up here, on Christmas Eve, harassing me after everything I have done for this family, and to bring him." She gestured vaguely at Harlan, as if he were a ghost she had summoned. "You are an ungrateful child, Vivian," she said, her voice rising in pitch. "You have always been ungrateful. You sit in your Denver high-rise, looking down on us. Everything I have spent, every single dollar, has been to keep this family afloat, to give your sister a chance. Something you would never do." Brittany, on cue, looked up from her phone. Her eyes were puffy. "Yeah, Viv, you have so much. You are rich. You do not even know what it is like for us. You would not even miss it. What is the big deal?" The words hung in the air. "You would not even miss it." I looked at Harlan. He was watching me, his face impassive. He was waiting. He turned his gaze, as heavy as a physical weight, to Brittany. "That bracelet," he said, his voice quiet. "The one you were flashing at the door on Christmas Eve. Where did the money come from?" Brittany's face flushed. "It was a gift." "From whom?" My boyfriend." "How?" Harlan continued. "Did your boyfriend, who I am told works part-time at the ski rental shop, afford a $5,000 piece from a jeweler in Cherry Creek?" Brittany's mouth opened and closed. "And you," he said, turning to Diane, "this cashmere, these decorations, the party you were so keen to protect, what was the source of the funds?" "The household account." "Of course," Diane said, indignant. "The emergency fund, the money Vivian contributes, for the family." "For the family?" Harlan repeated. He tapped the ledger. "An emergency trip to Scottsdale. Family gifts from Aspen. Household maintenance that correlates precisely with 3 cash withdrawals of $9,000 each, all in the same week." He looked at me. "Vivian, do you have anything to add to this accounting?" This was my cue. Not an emotional outburst, not a litany of my wounds. It was a presentation. I took my phone from my pocket. I did not connect to their Wi-Fi. I used my own secure hotspot. I brought up the first file, the screenshot of the long household emergency fund transaction log. "The bracelet," I said, my voice perfectly level, "was purchased on December 10th, with this charge." I held the phone out. The memo line says, "Family gifts," but it was drawn from an account funded by a loan I never applied for, secured against my job. I swiped to the next file, the UCC1 filing. "This is the lien," I said. This is my name, my corporate assets, pledged as collateral. Diane waved her hand dismissively. Oh, paperwork, Vivian. You always get lost in paperwork. I handle the details so you do not have to. You gave me permission. The power of attorney. Remember all those years ago? You signed it. She looked at Harlan, seeking an ally. She signed it, Daddy, 10 years ago, so I could manage things. The POA, I said, my voice dropping. The durable power of attorney. Exactly, Diane said, relieved, as if I was finally understanding. You see, Daddy, she agreed to it. Harlan did not look at her. He looked at the fireplace, at the stockings hung with care. His voice was cold iron. I never gave you a power of attorney. Diane. The room went silent. Diane's face crumpled in confusion. What? No, not you. Vivian. Vivian gave me the POA. I am aware, Harlan said. I am stating a fact. In all my years, in all my dealings, I never trusted you with my name. Why? And he turned his piercing blue eyes on her. Did you believe your daughter's name was yours to take? Diane stammered. But it is for the family. It was just a form. It was a forgery, I said, and the word landed in the room like a stone. Brittany, who had been silent, suddenly snapped. You were not supposed to know Mom said you would not check. She said he would not check. She clapped her hand over her mouth. The silence that followed was absolute. The ticking of the grandmother clock in the hallway sounded like hammer blows. Diane's face went chalk white. Brittany looked like she was going to be sick. Harlan had not moved. He just watched them. The trap sprung. The confession made. He looked at me for a long time. There was no pity in his eyes, only assessment. He was measuring my spine. Vivian, he said, you have been carrying them for a decade. You have paid for their comforts with your credit. You have paid for their silence with your compliance. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the head of his cane. Do you wish to continue this arrangement? I looked past him. I looked at the glittering tree, a monument to their fraud. I looked at my mother, her face a mask of exposed entitlement. I looked at my sister, who saw me not as family, but as a resource to be mined. I met my grandfather's gaze. No, I said. My voice was clear. It did not shake. I want my name back. The drive from Cedar Ridge back to Denver was different this time. It was not a flight. It was a commute. The confrontation in the living room had not been an ending. It had been a pre-trial hearing. I left before Harlan did, walking out while Diane was still sputtering about family loyalty and Brittany was staring at her phone, doubtless calculating her losses. I said nothing. My last line. I want my name back, had been the opening argument. Now, I needed to file the brief. The 27th of December is a dead time in the corporate world. It is a vacuum, but in the world of financial law, it is just another Tuesday. At 9 o'clock, I was not in my office at Northline. I was on the 42nd floor of a different glass tower in downtown Denver. The lobby was all black granite and silent. Recessed lighting. The name on the directory was Coltrane Associates. Harlan had not recommended her. I had. Northline had used Maya Coltrane's firm 2 years ago to handle a hostile internal audit, and I had watched her dismantle a senior vice president's entire defense in one afternoon using nothing but his own expense reports. She was not a lawyer you hired for a dispute. She was a lawyer you hired for a decontamination. Maya Coltrane did not have a law office. She had a command center. There were no leather-bound books or framed diplomas. There was a 30-foot glass wall overlooking the mountains, and a desk that looked like a single piece of polished obsidian. She was already there, nursing a black coffee. She was tall, impeccably dressed in a gray sheath dress, and she did not smile. Vivian, she said, gesturing to a chair. It was not a welcome. It was a summons. The holidays are a prime time for fraud. The banks are on skeleton crews and the victims are distracted. You, however, seem fully alert. You have my full attention for 60 minutes. Start. I did not give her the emotional story. I did not talk about Christmas, or my mother's hissing, or my sister's entitlement. I treated it like a client crisis at Northline. I set my laptop on her desk, opened the encrypted file, and put the "for when they forget" document on her main screen. "We have a situation," I said. "A fraudulent durable power of attorney, executed via signature forgery. That POA was used to secure a UCC-1 lien against my corporate assets, with the funds dispersed to a joint access account. The account shows a 5-year history of non-emergency, luxury spending by the cosigner. Last night, I discovered the primary grantor of my family's trust is, in fact, alive and is aware of the situation. He has activated a clawback provision within the trust, contingent on proving this abuse." Maya did not flinch. Her eyes scanned the documents, her fingers flying across her keyboard, opening, reading, assessing. She digested the fraudulent POA, the UCC-1 filing, the bank transfers, and the scan of the Whitaker Trust addendum in about 4 minutes. She looked up. Her eyes were sharp, not with sympathy, but with chilling clarity. "This is not a family dispute, Ms. Long," she said. "You are the victim of a long-term, multi-pronged financial crime. You have 2 fronts. The first is criminal, the second is civil. We will wage war on both." She spun one of her monitors to face me. It was now a blank whiteboard application. "The criminal side is simple," she said, her voice becoming a crisp, tactical summary. "Signature forgery on a legal instrument, fraudulent use of a power of attorney, wire fraud by using that POA to access your corporate portal, and, given the UCC filing, conspiracy to commit bank fraud. We can go to the Denver DA. It would be effective." I thought about my mother in a courtroom, about Brittany. My stomach turned. Maya saw my hesitation. "No, you are not ready to deploy the nuclear option. I understand. It is messy, and the press, for a woman in your position, would be catastrophic. We will hold the criminal charges in reserve. We will use them as leverage for the civil assault." She started typing. "The civil assault begins now. We do not wait. We do not negotiate. We reclaim your identity. We freeze their assets, and we sever their access. We operate on 4 pillars." She typed, "Pillar 1, nullify. First, the power of attorney. It is the root. It is the master key they used. We cut it off." She picked up her desk phone. She did not dial. She spoke to her assistant. "Sarah, I need you to draft a revocation of power of attorney for Vivian Long, effective immediately. File it with the county clerk. I also want you to draft a formal affidavit of forgery, referencing the original POA. I want that affidavit notarized and sent by courier to Ms. Long's private bank, legal department, before noon. We are putting them on notice that any transaction they have honored under that POA since its inception is now their liability, not hers." She hung up. "The POA is dead." She typed, "Pillar 2 contain. Second, the fraud. They have your name, your social, your history. They think of your identity as a public well. We poison it." She pointed to my phone. "Get it out. You are going to make 3 calls. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. You will not use the automated system. I will give you the direct numbers for the senior fraud desks. You will tell them you are a victim of identity theft, and you are placing an extended fraud alert and a credit freeze on your file. This means no one, not you, not them, can open a new line of credit in your name without a complex verification protocol. From this moment, your name is no longer a blank check." While I was on hold with the first bureau, she moved on. She typed, "Pillar 3 reverse. Third, the UCC-1 lien. This is the most dangerous active threat. It attaches your professional reputation to a high-interest loan. It is a time bomb. We are going to file a UCC-3 termination statement." She saw my confusion. "Think of the UCC-1 as the fire. The UCC-3 is the extinguisher. We are filing it on the grounds of secured party not entitled to file. We will state that the underlying loan agreement was based on fraud. specifically the fraudulent POA. The Scottsdale lender will fight it, but it begins the process of public correction. We are sanitizing your name in the public record. She was already dictating the filing to another assistant, citing the exact statute from memory. She typed, Pillar 4 freeze. Finally, the money, the Long Household Emergency Fund. You said the UCC loan was disbursed there. How much is left? I checked this morning, I said, my voice hoarse from the credit bureau call. About 40,000. They will drain it, Maya said, her voice flat. The moment they realize you are fighting back, they will pull every cent in cash. We are moving for a temporary restraining order, an ex parte TRO. We will file with the court this afternoon, arguing that a co-signer, Diane Long, has engaged in financial malfeasance and is a flight risk with the assets. We will ask the judge to freeze the account, effective immediately, pending a full hearing. She hit enter, and the plan sat there, glowing on the screen. Nullify, contain, reverse, freeze. That is the immediate plan, she said. That is what we do in the next 6 hours. She took a sip of her coffee. It was, I assumed, her second or third. Now, the strategic plan, she continued, pulling up a new window. First, North Line, you must get ahead of this. You will schedule a meeting with your legal counsel and your direct superior today. You will frame this as an external, familial security breach. You will provide them with the IP trace from their own servers. You will be the strategist you are, managing a crisis. Your firm will close ranks to protect you. We will work with them to ensure your file is scrubbed of all unofficial relative contact data. Your corporate identity must be hermetically sealed from your family. I nodded. That, I knew how to do. Second, the clawback. Her eyes lit up. This, I could tell, was the part she enjoyed. The Whitaker Trust. This addendum is a beautiful piece of legal architecture. Your grandfather is a very precise man. The TRO will freeze the new money, but the clawback gets you the old money. We need to prove the abuse based on name that the addendum describes. For that, we need a specialist. She picked up her phone again. Get me forensic accounting. Get me David. She turned back to me. We are hiring a forensic accountant. David will review the last 5 years of transfers, not just from the joint account. We will look for patterns. We will cross-reference Diane's known assets with Brittany's spending. We will build a map of the money, showing, beyond any doubt, that your name was systematically mined to fund their lifestyle. This report will be our primary weapon in triggering the clawback. She stood up. The 60 minutes were over. My firm will handle all of this. We will file. We will audit. We will move for the TRO. You, in the meantime, have one job. She walked me to the door. Her face was stern, her gaze unwavering. From this moment, you do not speak to them, not Diane, not Brittany, not on the phone, not in person. You will not answer their texts, their weeping calls, their angry emails. They are no longer your family. They are the opposing party in a civil and potential criminal action. What if they show up? You close the door. If they refuse to leave, you call the police. Maya handed me a card. My paralegal is setting up a dedicated email address. All communication from the opposing party must be routed to that address. It will be logged, archived, and used as evidence. Do you understand? Vivian, no more spontaneous arguments, no more emotional confrontations. You do not get angry. You do not explain. You do not engage. You let the record speak. I walked out of her office into the bright morning. The sun was high. The city was moving. I had just spent more money in an hour than my mother had paid in taxes in a decade. But for the first time in my life, I felt the overwhelming, crystalline relief of being, truly, on my own. I had my strategy. I had my team. And the record was about to get very, very loud. Maya's legal assault was the artillery. My meeting at Northline was the diplomatic mission, but the work I did that night, alone in my apartment from midnight until the sun rose on the 28th, was the intelligence operation. Maya had locked down my credit and moved to freeze the accounts. My meeting with Northline's general counsel had been exactly what I predicted: a cold, swift, corporate sealing of the breach. They were appalled at the UCC1 filing, thanked me for my transparency, and immediately tasked their own internal security team to scrub their servers of all external familial access points. My professional life was now a fortress, but the evidence, the why, the proof needed for Harlan's clawback, that was my job. Maya's team was auditing the bank statements. I was auditing the life they had built on top of those statements. I went back to the "for when they forget" file and began to add the color, the context, the human proof of the financial crime. I started with Brittany. Her Instagram account was a public monument to her own delusion. It was a curated feed of what she called the soft life. I pulled up the long household emergency fund ledger on one monitor and Brittany's Instagram feed on the other. It was not a difficult puzzle. It was a matching game. March 10th, a charge for $800 at Aspen Mountain Club, Brittany's feed. March 10th, a glowing selfie of her on a ski lift. Sponsored by Tag, conspicuously absent, captioned, "Sometimes you just need to get away and breathe the mountain air. Blessed soft life." April 2nd, a charge for $1,200 to Scottsdale Oasis Spa, Brittany's feed. April 4th, a series of photos of her and a friend by a glittering blue pool, holding champagne flutes. This RR was absolutely necessary for my mental health. Self-care Scottsdale, the restaurants she tagged, the boutiques she posted from her hauls, the weekend trips to Vegas they lined up, date for date, dollar for dollar, with the family gifts and household maintenance withdrawals from the account. She was not just spending the money, she was documenting the evidence, bragging about the theft in real time. Then I turned to my mother. Diane's social media was a different, more insidious performance. Her public-facing Facebook page was a curated image of a struggling, noble, single mother. She was all vague inspirational quotes and posts about the hardship of raising 2 daughters alone. I scrolled back, years back. I found a post from 2018. It was a long, rambling request for prayers and support, implying a medical scare, thanking her community for being there for a single mom just trying to keep it all together. I cross-referenced the date. 3 days later, the emergency fund showed a $5,000 withdrawal memo lined, "Required travel for health." I searched the local society pages for that same week, and there she was, Diane Long, smiling in a gala photo, listed as a gold-level donor at a local charity art auction. The minimum bid for that level was $5,000. The item she was posing with a designer handbag that I now recognized, the one she always carried when she wanted to look important. She had laundered her medical need into a status symbol. I went deeper. That diamond bracelet Brittany was wearing. The charge was from a high-end jeweler, but something about Brittany's panic on the porch felt off. I did a public records search, not on her name, but on the jeweler, and cross-referenced it with local business filings. It led me to the city's pawn shop database, and there it was, a transaction. 6 months ago. Item, gold and diamond tennis bracelet, approx. 3 carats. Customer Brittany Long. Status pawned for $2,000. 2 weeks later, another transaction. Status redeemed. The date she redeemed it. Pulling it out of Hawk. The day after a household maintenance cash withdrawal of $2,500 from the fund. She was not just getting gifts, she was managing her cash flow, pawning her fraudulent assets and then using my name to buy them back. The sickness of it, the systematic rot, was staggering. I found the repair bill for Diane's SUV from 3 months ago. The transmission had failed. She had called me, weeping, about how she would be stranded. I had handled it. Paid the $3,000 bill over the phone with my own credit card to just get it done. I pulled that credit card statement, and then I pulled the statement for the supplementary card that Diane had on my personal account, the one I had given her for gas and groceries only. She had not used my card. She had used her card, the supplementary one. The bill I had paid was a complete fiction. I had simply moved money from one of my pockets to another, while she had played the role of the helpless victim. I went back to the Northline portal, to the IT logs, the failed request for a supplementary corporate card, the one using my scanned driver's license, was the headline. But there was a footnote, a month before that, a separate internal IT help desk ticket. It was from Diane, using the family contact email I had foolishly set up for her in the corporate system years ago. The request: need VPN access for family member. Vivian is traveling, and I need to access her files to help her with a project. It was an IT employee's worst nightmare. The ticket had been denied. Of course, with a polite but firm note, per Corporate Policy 401B, all network access must be provisioned to an employee. We cannot grant VPN access to non-Northline personnel. She had tried to get inside the fortress. When that failed, she had settled for using my name to get a loan. I sat back, my entire body humming with a cold, clear energy. I started to build a new document. It was a timeline. Column 1, my career. Column 2, their withdrawals. 2015. I am promoted to senior associate at Northline. My salary increases by 20%. 2015, the Long Household Emergency Fund is opened. The first household maintenance withdrawal of $5,000 occurs. 2017, I receive my first major annual bonus. 2017, Diane's required travel for health. The art auction occurs. Brittany begins posting about her new car. A lease I now suspected was co-signed with my forged signature. 2020, I am promoted to Director of Strategy. My bonus is substantial. 2020, the luxury spending accelerates. The trips to Aspen, the spa days in Scottsdale. The withdrawals become monthly, systematic. Every step I took forward in my life, they had used as a justification to dig a deeper hole in my name. My success was not a source of pride for them. It was a resource to be exploited. The picture was almost complete. I just needed the final confirmation. I did something I had not done in a decade. I called Mrs. Gable, our old neighbor, the one who lived across the street from my mother, the one who saw everything. "Vivian, dear," she answered, her voice frail but sharp. "What a surprise. I was so sorry to hear you could not make it for Christmas." "I was there, Mrs. Gable. I am just calling to check on Mom." "Oh," she said, and the temperature of her voice dropped. "Well, she is fine. She is very busy. So many parties. You know, it is funny." "What is funny, Mrs. Gable?" "The trust. The one your grandfather set up. I remember Diane telling us all it was for medical emergencies. But her emergencies always seem to happen on a Friday night. So many wine parties over there. I see the cars. They are all very loud. She must be feeling much better. That was it. The Whitaker Trust paid distributions on the 15th of every month, earmarked for family medical and educational needs. The neighbors were watching the medical need parties. My phone, the one Maya had designated for all opposing party communication, lit up. It was a cascade, a Facebook message, from an aunt in Ohio. "Vivian, what is this I hear? Your mother is beside herself. After all she sacrificed for you, how dare you bring these men and lawyers into her home? You have forgotten what family means." Another, from a cousin. "Your sister is crying. You froze her account. Her rent is due. You are a monster. Vivian, a rich, cold monster." Maya had called them flying monkeys, the network of enablers Diane had cultivated. I forwarded them to the dedicated email address Maya's firm had set up. Within minutes, a reply came back. Not from Maya, but from her paralegal. Attached was a PDF. Standard legal response. Harassment family. It was a form letter. "Dear name, your correspondence regarding Vivian Long has been received. Ms. Long has retained Coltrane Associates as legal counsel. All future communication regarding this matter must be directed to our firm. Any attempt to contact Ms. Long directly will be considered harassment and documented for future legal action." It was the most beautiful thing I had ever read. Then, a new message, a text, from an unknown number. You think you are so smart with your Denver lawyer? You are a cold-hearted bitch. People in Cedar Ridge should know who you really are. The local paper would love to hear about the Northline strategist who attacks her own sick mother. I did not reply. I took a screenshot. I forwarded it to Maya. Her reply came 1 minute later. Good. Preserve it. We are now documenting threats. This helps us. I was about to close my laptop when a final email came in. It was not from my family. It was from a Mr. Allen, with an email address from a large, international auditing firm. The email was copied to me, Maya Coltrane, and an address I did not recognize, which I assumed was Harlan's. As requested by the grantor, it read, "We have begun our independent audit of the Whitaker Living Trust, effective today, December 27th. All beneficiary distributions are suspended pending the outcome of this review. We will require access to all relevant financial records from all named beneficiaries." Harlan had been silent, but he had not been still. While I was building my file, he had been deploying his own. The audit was happening. Not next week, not tomorrow. It was happening now. The temporary restraining order, filed by Maya on the 27th, had landed like a bomb. The Long Household Emergency Fund was flash frozen by court order. The effect was immediate. My phone, the one dedicated to the legal channel, received an email from a new address, a hastily created burner, demanding a meeting. Diane had finally realized her key no longer worked. Maya scheduled the meeting for the 29th. At her office, not neutral ground, my ground, I saw them arrive from the 42nd floor window. They looked small and lost in the black granite lobby. Diane in her best coat, Brittany in a hoodie and sunglasses, as if she were a celebrity hiding from paparazzi. They were not just in a different city, they were on a different planet. The conference room was glass, cold, and overlooked the city. Harlan was already there, seated at the head of the table, his cane resting beside him. He looked at no one. I sat to Maya's right. We were a team. Diane and Brittany were escorted in by a paralegal. They were the opposing party. Diane tried to seize control, to rearrange the room's atmosphere with her practiced matronly performance. "Vivian," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured hurt as she sat down. "I am glad you finally agreed to see us. This has gone far enough." Maya clicked her pen. "Let us be clear. Ms. Long, this is not a social call. You are here because your counsel, whom I assume you have retained." Diane flushed. "I do not need counsel to talk to my own daughter." "Then you are here as an unrepresented party," Maya continued. "In a preliminary meeting to discuss the civil charges of financial fraud, identity theft, and fraudulent conveyance, pursuant to the emergency injunction granted on December 27th. Diane's performance faltered. This was not the script she had prepared. "You must stop this. Vivian," Diane pleaded, turning to me. "The bank. They called me. The account is frozen. What you have done. It is humiliating. You are airing our private business. You must tell your person." She waved a dismissive hand at Maya. "To undo it. We are family. We must preserve our face, our reputation in the community." "Reputation," Maya said, "is a consequence of one's actions. Shall we review them?" Brittany, who had been vibrating with anger, finally broke. The tears were instant and theatrical. "You do not understand," she wailed, slamming her hand on the expensive table. "You think this is a game? You froze everything I was starting a business." She turned to me, her face a mask of furious self-pity. "I was trying to be like you. Vivian, I was trying to be independent. I put everything into my startup, and it failed. All the money is gone. You froze my accounts and I lost my deposits. Everything is ruined because of you." The room was silent, save for her echoing sobs. Maya let the silence sit for a beat. Then she slid a thin folder across the polished obsidian table. "Ms. Long," Maya said to Brittany, "is this the failed startup you are referring to?" Brittany sniffled, wiping her nose, and looked down. It was a lease agreement. This is a 3-year commercial lease for a retail space in the Cedar Ridge Promenade, signed 3 weeks ago, for an entity named Brittany's Bubbles and Bar. Maya tapped the paper. A mini bar, I believe the addendum called it. She slid a second piece of paper over, a bank statement. And this, Maya said, is the $5,000 security deposit for that lease, paid on December 19th from the Long Household Emergency Fund. The memo line you wrote, Diane, was emergency plumbing repair. This venture seems less failed and more fraudulently funded. Brittany's sobs stopped. She just stared at the papers. Diane's face hardened. The victim was gone. The warrior emerged. You have no right, she hissed. I am her mother. I am her agent. I manage the family finances. Vivian gave me the right. She signed the papers. Did she? Maya said, her voice deceptively soft. Yes. Diane fumbled in her oversized designer bag, the one from the charity auction, and pulled out a crumpled, folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy of the durable power of attorney. She slammed it on the table. See, 10 years ago, she signed it. It is legal. I can do what I want. Maya did not touch the paper. She leaned in, inspecting it as if it were a curious, dead insect. Diane, Maya said, using her first name for the first time, a calculated act of dominance. This document is fascinating. It is the centerpiece of your fraud, and it is a catastrophe. It is legal. No, Maya said. It is a performance. First, the notary public you listed, a James T. Farrell. His commission in the state of Colorado expired in 2001. He was, in fact, deceased when you supposedly had him sign this. Diane's jaw went slack. Second, Maya continued, the notary identification number you fabricated, it has 8 digits. A Colorado notary ID has 12. You were not even a convincing forger. And third, Maya leaned back. The signature, the one you lifted from Vivian's mortgage refinancing, it is a clean forgery. But under the authority of a non-existent, deceased notary, it is legally worthless. It is, however, excellent evidence for a criminal fraud charge. The room was ice. Diane was pale. Brittany was shaking. Harlan, who had not moved a single muscle since they entered, turned his head, very slowly, and looked at Brittany. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the sterile air. Brittany, in all the years you have been taking from this fund, from your sister, have you ever, even once, paid back a single dollar? Brittany stared at her lap. She shrank under his gaze. The silence was her answer. I had not spoken. I did not need to. I reached into my own briefcase and pulled out the file I had prepared. For when they forget. I took the first page. It was a screenshot of Brittany, in Aspen, holding a champagne glass, dated. I placed it on the table. Then I placed the bank statement next to it. The charge from the Aspen Mountain Club. With the matching date, I placed the photo of the Scottsdale pool party, then the matching charge for the spa. I placed the pawn shop receipt for the diamond bracelet, then the bank transfer for its redemption. I did not accuse. I did not yell. I just built the case. One piece of paper at a time, a silent, damning pile in the center of the table. Maya leaned forward, the surgeon, ready to close. We are offering a one-time, non-negotiable, pre-trial civil settlement. This is your only chance to avoid this going to a criminal referral. She slid a single sheet of paper toward Diane. The terms are simple. 1, you will consent to the permanent dissolution of the Long Household Emergency Fund and the return of all remaining assets to Ms. Vivian Long. 2, you will sign a full, notarized confession of the fraudulent power of attorney. 3, you will agree to a repayment plan, secured against your own assets, for the $200,000 you have fraudulently taken. 4, you will both enroll in and complete a mandatory financial literacy course. 5, you will issue a public, written apology to Vivian to be distributed to the family members you have lied to. Diane looked at the paper as if it were coated in acid. She read the terms. Her face went from pale to a deep, mottled red. Apology repayment. This is extortion. She laughed, a high, sharp sound of disbelief. This is absurd. She turned from Maya, dismissing her. She turned to the head of the table. She looked at Harlan. Her entire demeanor shifted. She became the little girl, the daughter. This was her final, desperate play. "Daddy," she said, her voice breaking, soft and pleading. "Daddy, are you going to let them do this to me? To your family? She is calling me a thief. Me, your only daughter. You came back. You came back for me. Did not you, to protect me from her, tell her to stop? Daddy, tell them all to stop." Harlan looked at her. His face was granite. He did not respond to Daddy. "You always believed," he said, his voice a low gravel, "that you were my only heir. You forgot you were only my only child." He reached into his own leather briefcase and retrieved a single, thin file folder. It was pale blue. "You knew about the trust," he said. "You were fixated on it, but you never bothered to ask about my personal will." He slid the file onto the table. It was labeled, simply, Addendum K. "This," Harlan said, "is a codicil I had drafted 5 years ago. It is a behavioral clause." Maya picked it up, as if on cue. Addendum K, modifying the last will and testament of Harlan Whitaker. It states, she read, that any beneficiary who, in the grantor's judgment, engages in acts of financial coercion, emotional manipulation, or reputational leverage using the guise of a blood relationship. What, Diane whispered, shall have their portion of the inheritance, outside of the conditional trust, reduced to zero. All assets, real and personal, shall be redirected to the remaining, non-offending beneficiaries. Diane stared at the blue folder. She was not just losing the emergency fund. She was losing the house. She was losing everything. Brittany, watching her mother's complete collapse, began to panic. Her eyes darted to her purse. She thought she was being subtle. She fumbled inside it. Her thumb slid across the side of her phone. Maya stopped reading. She looked directly at Brittany. She saw the faint red glow of the recording light from the half-open zipper. Maya looked at Brittany, then at her own pen, then back at Brittany's purse. She tapped the table twice, a silent signal. "I see you." A slow, cold smile, the first I had ever seen, touched Maya's lips. She understood. Brittany, in her panic, had just handed them the final piece of evidence, a clandestine, illegal recording of a settlement negotiation. Maya leaned forward, her voice becoming louder, clearer, for the benefit of the microphone in the purse. "Since a civil agreement is clearly impossible at this time, we will see you at the emergency hearing. It is scheduled for tomorrow, December 30th. The judge will hear all arguments regarding the permanent injunction, the fraudulent POA, the UCC-1 filing, and the activation of the Whitaker Trust clawback. And of course," she smiled, "this new Addendum K. I am sure the court will find this all very educational." The failed negotiation at Maya's office was not an end. It was a declaration of war. The legal battle was set for the courtroom on the 30th, but Diane and Brittany, having failed in the boardroom, opened a new, personal front. They had lost the game of law. Now they were playing the game of chaos. It began on the night of the 29th, less than 12 hours after the meeting. My laptop pinged. It was an alert from the Northline internal security team, the one now monitoring my professional footprint. "Vivian," the email from our head of IT read, "a new review was just posted to our public corporate feedback portal. It is anonymous, but given our conversation, you need to see this." He had attached a screenshot. It was a 1-star review for Northline Strategies. The user was a concerned citizen. The review was short and vicious. "This firm employs strategists who are deceptive, ungrateful, and use their corporate power to attack their own family. Their advice is heartless, and their tactics are built on betrayal. Stay away from Northline if you value loyalty." My blood ran cold. This was not just an attack on me, it was an attack on my firm. It was an attempt to damage my professional reputation, the one asset I had built beyond their reach. We traced the IP. The IT head's email continued. It is a residential line in Cedar Ridge. I have already flagged the review for removal, but I wanted you to have the record. The IP trace, of course, resolved to my mother's address. Diane had failed to move Harlan, so she was now trying to burn down my career. I forwarded it to Maya. Her reply was instant and cold. Good. This is an escalation. It proves the reputational leverage described in Addendum K. We will add it to the filing for tomorrow. The morning of the 30th, hours before the hearing. I went to my car in the parking garage beneath my apartment, and I stopped. A long, jagged silver line ran the entire length of the driver's side, from the headlight to the tail light. The metal was gouged, deep and intentional. It was keyed. I felt a surge of violation that was deeper than the financial fraud. This was a physical act. This was rage. I called building security. I did not touch it. The security chief, a retired cop, was grim. The cameras in the garage are high angle. Ms. Long. They show your space, but they will not get a face. But the street-level cameras might have caught them. An hour later, he sent me the file. The timestamp was 3:15 in the morning. A car had idled at the garage entrance for 3 minutes. It was not a car I recognized immediately, but it was familiar. A late 90s, dark green sedan, one headlight out, a spiderweb crack in the windshield. Then I placed it. It was the car belonging to Brittany's on-again, off-again boyfriend, the one who worked at the ski shop, the one who had supposedly bought her the diamond bracelet. They were not just threatening me, they were sending proxies. I sent the video file to Maya. Her response was a phone call, not an email. "This stops now," she said. Her voice was pure ice. "This is no longer just financial. This is harassment and vandalism. I am filing for an emergency temporary protective order on your behalf, citing the online threats, the anonymous review, and this vandalism. The hearing is at 2. I am adding this to the motion. And Vivian." "Yes. Hire a private security detail to meet you at the courthouse. And I'm not joking. Install new cameras, inside and outside your apartment. Now." The world had tilted. This was my mother, my sister, and I was now being advised to install cameras and hire a bodyguard. As I was on the phone with a security firm, a different kind of call came through. It was from a producer for a major business podcast. "Integrity in business. Vivian Long," the producer said. "Chipper and professional. We are doing a series on corporate transparency in the modern age, and your name came up. We would love to have you on as a keynote speaker. Your reputation at Northline for handling crisis PR with integrity is exactly what our audience wants to hear about." The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. Here I was, my integrity being publicly savaged by my own family, my car vandalized, my name attached to a fraudulent loan, and I was being invited to speak on integrity. The risk was immense. If I said yes, and Diane or Brittany leaked a twisted version of this story to the press, the ungrateful daughter narrative, it could backfire spectacularly. It could look like I was a hypocrite, a fraud myself. But if I said no, I was hiding. I was letting them control the narrative. I told the producer I would consider it. I immediately called my boss at Northline. I laid it all out: the review, the car, the podcast invitation. He was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was firm. "Vivian, you do the podcast. You do it, and you lean in. The review they posted is a lie. The work you do for us is the truth. Transparency is not just your brand, it is your character. Do not let them make you doubt that. Northline will back you. 100%. We stand by our people, especially when they are in the right." I hung up, my hand shaking, but not from fear, from a strange, cold resolve. That evening, the night before New Year's Eve and 2 days after the hearing, there was a knock on my apartment door. Not the intercom from downstairs, my door. I looked through the peephole. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was Harlan. He was alone. No cane. This time, he just stood there in his tweed jacket, looking at the door, as if waiting for me to solve a puzzle. I opened it. The new security chain was still in my hand. He looked at me, then at the chain, then at the new, high-resolution camera I had installed above the doorway. "Good," he said. It was the first word he had spoken. "A necessary upgrade." He stepped inside. It was the first time he had ever been in my home. He did not look around, did not comment on the view of the city lights or the modern furniture. He was not a social guest. He walked to my dining table and placed a thin, worn, leather-bound notebook on its surface. It was not a gift. It looked like a ledger. I just stared at it. "I am not here for a holiday, Vivian," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting. "I am here for the accounting." I sat opposite him. He pushed the notebook toward me. "Open it." I did. The pages were thick, creamy, and covered in his precise architectural handwriting. It was not a ledger. It was a draft. The title page read, "The Whitaker Living Trust, Draft, 1998. This was the original, the one he had written before he died. I flipped through the pages, seeing the origins of the clauses, the conditional distributions, the requirements for self-sufficiency, and then I saw the margin notes. On the page defining the beneficiaries, next to Diane's name, he had written a single note in red ink. "Prone to fantasy, lacks structure, a liability." My breath caught. He pointed to another page, a blank one at the very end. He had written one sentence on it, a long time ago. The ink was faded. "For the one who knows how to say no when necessary." I looked up at him. His blue eyes were not cold. They were simply clear, like ice. "I am a man who deals in assets and liabilities. Vivian," he said. "I built an empire on seeing which was which. When I saw my own daughter, my only child, saw me only as an asset to be liquidated, I had a choice." "You disappeared," I whispered. "I reallocated," he corrected. "I removed the asset. I staged the accident in the Caymans. I transferred my holdings into a series of blind trusts and holding companies, and I waited. I waited to see what would happen when the money tap was turned off. Would Diane, would Brittany, learn to build something for themselves, or would they simply find a new asset to gut?" He looked at me. "They found you." "You knew," I said, the realization dawning. "The whole time, you were watching." "The auditors always reported to me," Harlan said. "I saw the trust being drained for medical parties. I saw the credit reports. I saw them start with your student loan cosigns, then the car, then the credit cards. I saw the forged POA when it was first filed. I did nothing." "Why?" The word was torn from me. "Why let it get this bad? Why let them do this to me?" "Because," he said, leaning forward, his voice a low, hard rumble, "you cannot save a person who will not say no. You were a willing participant. Vivian, you paid for their approval. You financed their disrespect. You were as much a liability to yourself as they were to you. I was waiting for the one who knew how to say no." "The Christmas Eve alert," I said. "The UCC-1. The UCC-1 filing," he confirmed, "was the final step. They were no longer just gutting you. They were gutting your corporation. They were destroying the very asset they were feeding on. It was unsustainable. I could not let them bankrupt my granddaughter, but I would not step in. Not until you, not I, filed the first paper. Not until you chose to stop the bleeding yourself." He stood up. He had not touched the coffee I had made. He walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the knob, and looked back at me. He looked at the files on my table, the printouts for the hearing, the for when they forget file. "You did well at the hearing yesterday," he said. "The judge was impressed. The tarot is solid. The protection order was a good move." "They are my family," I said, the words tasting like ash. "No," Harlan said, his voice final. "They are the opposing party, and you will not win this with anger. you will not win it with tears, or by pleading your case. You will win it with the record. You will win it with the audit. You will win it with the facts, piled so high that the truth is the only thing left standing. He opened the door. Win with the record. Vivian. It is the only victory that lasts. The hearing on the 30th of December was not a full trial. It was an emergency preliminary hearing, a battle waged in a small, sterile courtroom to determine if the emergency orders, the temporary restraining order, the asset freeze, should be made permanent pending a full trial. Diane and Brittany had been forced to hire a lawyer. They had found one, a local Cedar Ridge attorney named Mr. Hayes, who looked overwhelmed and was clearly operating on a contingency he was already regretting. He sat with them at one table. I sat at the other with Maya Coltrane. Harlan was not at our table. He sat in the first row of the gallery. Directly behind me, a silent, immovable presence, the judge, a sharp woman in her 50s named Judge Alameen, was not interested in emotion. She was interested in facts. Ms. Coltrane, the judge said, her voice echoing in the quiet room. You are the petitioner. You filed this emergency motion. Summarize for me, in 2 minutes, why I should not dissolve this injunction and let this family handle their misunderstanding in private. Maya stood. She was a pillar of calm, gray professionalism. Your Honor, this is not a misunderstanding. This is a calculated, multi-year financial conspiracy. We will show that the respondents, Ms. Diane Long and Ms. Brittany Long, engaged in a pattern of fraud and identity theft against the petitioner, Ms. Vivian Long. She ticked the points off on her fingers. First, the fabrication of a durable power of attorney, using a forged signature and a deceased notary. Second, the use of that fraudulent POA to apply for commercial loans, culminating in a fraudulent UCC-1 lien against the petitioner's corporate assets. Third, the systematic withdrawal of funds from a joint account funds in excess of $200,000 for documented luxury purchases, all while claiming these were household emergencies. We are here to protect Ms. Vivian Long's name, her professional standing, and her financial future from the people who were, by law, supposed to be her fiduciaries. The judge nodded, her face impassive. She looked at Mr. Hayes. Your response? Mr. Hayes stood, shuffling his papers. He was outgunned, and he knew it. He fell back on the only defense he had: sentiment. Your Honor, he began, his voice attempting a folksy charm. This is a family, a loving family. Ms. Diane Long, my client, is a single mother who has sacrificed everything for her 2 daughters. He gestured to Diane, who, on cue, lowered her head and brought a tissue to her eyes. Yes, he continued, there may have been informalities in the paperwork. A mother, in her desire to protect her children, to give them the life they deserved, may have overstepped, but the motive, Your Honor. The motive was love, not greed. This is a case of a wealthy, successful daughter. He just adjured to me, turning on the family that supported her, the family that built her. This is a simple disagreement, and Ms. Vivian Long has escalated it with high-priced Denver lawyers, all out of spite. Beside him, Brittany began to cry. Not the theatrical wail from Maya's office, but a quiet, trembling lip performance. I just looked up to my sister, she whispered, just loud enough for the judge to hear. I was just trying to make her proud. I was under so much pressure to be successful like her. I made mistakes, but she's my sister. The performance was nauseating. It was also, for a moment, effective. The judge's gaze softened slightly. This is what they did. This was their trade. Then Maya stood up. Your Honor, since Mr. Hayes has opened the door to motive and love, I would like to present the facts. Proceed. Regarding the informal paperwork, Maya said, I submit to the court Exhibit A, the fraudulent power of attorney. It appeared on the overhead screen. And Exhibit B, a certified death certificate for the listed notary, Mr. James Farrell. dated 2 years prior to the POA's execution, and Exhibit C, an affidavit from the actual Colorado Notary Commission, stating the identification number on this document does not exist. The judge's eyes narrowed. The softness was gone. Mr. Hayes calls the motive love. Maya continued. I call it lifestyle, and I would like to call our first witness, Mr. David Chen, the forensic accountant. David, the man Maya had hired, was precise, boring, and utterly devastating. He took the stand, and Maya led him through his findings. Mr. Chen, you reviewed the last 5 years of the Long Household Emergency Fund, correct? I did. And you also reviewed Ms. Diane Long's public statements and the Whitaker Trust's designated medical and educational distributions. I did. What did you find? I found a consistent, non-wavering pattern, David said, his voice a monotone. The withdrawals from the fund, which Ms. Diane Long memo-lined as household maintenance, family gifts, or medical travel, do not correlate with any known medical emergencies or household disasters. What do they correlate with? They correlate precisely, David said, pulling up a color-coded graph on the screen. With luxury events, the dates of the largest cash withdrawals, such as the one on May 10th, correspond to the annual Scottsdale Spa Week. The medical travel purchase in August matches, to the dollar, the winning bid for a designer handbag at a charity auction where Ms. Long was photographed. The emergency plumbing withdrawal was a deposit on a commercial bar lease. The spending pattern is not emergency, it is aspirational, and it was all funded by the petitioner. The judge stared at the graph. Mr. Hayes. Mr. Hayes looked at Diane. My client was managing the family's social standing, as is her right as the matriarch. The judge cut him off with a single, raised hand. Save it for your closing. Counsel. One final matter, Your Honor, Maya said. We have in the gallery the grantor of the Whitaker Trust, Mr. Harlan Whitaker. Harlan stood. He did not look at the judge. He looked at Diane. Mr. Whitaker, the judge said, you are the subject of much speculation. Is it true you are, in fact, alive? I am, Harlan said, his voice filling the room. And is it true you have enacted a codicil, an addendum K to your will? I have, Harlan said. It was drafted, signed, and notarized 5 years ago, and sealed by my attorneys. It outlines, in no uncertain terms, the consequences for any beneficiary who uses the guise of a blood relationship to commit financial or emotional coercion against another. His eyes were locked on Diane. She looked away. The judge had heard enough. She looked at her notes for a long, silent minute. The only sound was the clock. This is a preliminary hearing, Judge Alameen said. But the evidence presented by the petitioner is overwhelming. She looked at Diane and Brittany. Her voice was sharp. Mr. Hayes, your defense of love is insulting to this court's intelligence. Love is not a defense for forgery. Family is not a license for fraud. She issued her ruling from the bench. The temporary restraining order is granted and extended. The account, Long Household Emergency Fund, is to remain frozen, and I am temporarily stripping Ms. Diane Long of all signatory and management rights. Pending the full trial, all assets within are to be held in escrow. She then looked at me. The court is also granting the petitioner's request for a temporary protective order. Ms. Diane Long and Ms. Brittany Long are forbidden from contacting, harassing, or coming within 100 yards of Ms. Vivian Long, her residence, or her place of employment. All communication must go through counsel. She was not done. Furthermore, a preliminary injunction is granted. Ms. Brittany Long is hereby forbidden from using the petitioner's name, credit, or personal information for any purpose, and I am ordering a preliminary, partial restitution. The $40,000 from the recent UCC1 loan, which sits in the frozen account, is to be immediately returned to the petitioner. It was a total victory. The judge looked at me. Ms. Vivian Long, do you have anything you wish to say? I stood. I did not look at my mother or sister. I looked at the judge. I remembered Harlan's words. Win with the record. Yes, Your Honor, I said. My voice was quiet, but it did not shake. For 32 years, my name has been used by others. Today, I am here to request that it be returned to me, intact. I sat down. The silence was broken by Diane. She surged to her feet, her face a mask of purple rage, the performance of the loving mother utterly gone. You, she screamed, pointing at me, the word echoing. Mr. Hayes put a hand on her arm, but she shook it off. You chose money over your mother. You chose strangers over your own blood. You did this. You destroyed your family. I did not flinch. I did not look at her. I looked straight ahead at the judge, who was already banging her gavel. Order, the judge yelled. Order, Mr. Hayes. Control your client, or I will have her removed for contempt. Diane was still sputtering, her face contorted. As a bailiff moved toward her, she finally sat, but she was shaking, her eyes burning into the side of my head. The judge, her face grim, looked at the calendar. This was an emergency hearing. The evidence is complex. This court will set a full trial date to make a final ruling on the fraudulent POA, the full clawback of funds, and the activation of Addendum K. This court reconvenes on January 6th. She banged the gavel. We are adjourned. Maya and I packed our briefcases in silence. We walked out of the courtroom. Harlan was waiting. He simply nodded, once, and walked toward the exit. We had won the battle. The judge had frozen the assets and returned the first 40,000. The trial on January 6th would be the end. But as I walked into the cold December air, I knew there was one day left in the year, New Year's Eve, and Harlan Whitaker was not a man who left a final move on the board. He had given them one last chance to confess at Maya's office. With the trial looming, he would not let the new year begin without one final play. The clock was ticking. The day of the hearing was the 30th of December. The next day, the 31st, the city of Denver was preparing to celebrate. The legal world was shut down, but the war was not over. At 10 in the morning on New Year's Eve, a courier delivered a single, thick, cream-colored envelope to my door. It was not from a law firm. The embossing on the back was of the Chop House, the oldest, most expensive restaurant in Cedar Ridge, a place of dark wood, leather, and 100-year-old traditions. Inside was a simple, engraved invitation. For a dinner of reconciliation, tonight, 8 o'clock, Harlan Whitaker. It was not a request. It was a command, and it had been sent to all of us. Maya called me immediately. It is a trap, Vivian, she said, her voice sharp. I know, I said. The protective order is still in effect. You do not have to go. He is orchestrating. He is pulling strings. It is dangerous. It is the last day of the year. Maya, I said, looking at the heavy cardstock. He is not a man who likes to leave accounts open. I will be there. Then so will I, she said. Not at the table, but I will be there. I arrived at the Chop House at 8:00. Self-correction, use spoken numbers. At 8 o'clock, the restaurant was hushed, filled with old Cedar Ridge money celebrating the new year. The hostess did not ask for my name. She simply nodded. Mr. Whitaker's private dining room is ready. I was led to the back, to a room sealed off by heavy oak sliding doors. Harlan was already seated at the head of a large circular table. The table was set for 4, and in the center, there was not a floral arrangement. There was a box. It was an old wooden box, perhaps a foot square, bound in dark, tarnished brass. It looked like a sea chest, or a document safe from 100 years ago. It had a heavy lid and, most prominently, 3 large, complex-looking keyholes, a triple-locked box. I sat. I said nothing. At 8:05, The doors slid open again. Diane and Brittany entered. Their transformation was astonishing. After the rage and humiliation of the courtroom, I had expected to see them broken or furious. Instead, they were hopeful. They were dressed in their absolute best. Diane wore a black dress and pearls, her makeup flawless. Brittany wore a conservative, dark blue silk blouse, her hair pulled back. They looked like a family attending a reading of a will, believing they were the sole heirs. They had seen the invitation. A dinner of reconciliation, and believed it. They thought the court hearing had been a test, a performance, and now the patriarch, having seen them humbled, was going to welcome them back. They thought Harlan had finally softened. "Daddy," Diane said, her voice a warm, gentle coo. She rushed to Harlan's side, kissed his cheek. "Thank you for this. Thank you for bringing us all together. This is what family does." "Hello, Grandpa," Brittany said, her voice soft and girlish. She moved to his other side, her eyes wide and full of admiration. They sat down. Diane on Harlan's right, Brittany on his left. I was left opposite him, the enemy. "This is lovely," Diane said, beaming. "Just lovely." A waiter entered, silent as a ghost. "Mr. Whitaker, the wine." "Of course," Brittany chirped, her hand immediately going to the bottle of deep red. "Let me, Grandpa, I know you like the—" She squinted at the label. "The 1982. She poured him a glass. She poured Diane a glass. She poured herself a glass. She did not pour one for me. She was performing the role of the devoted, attentive granddaughter. Her hands, I noticed, were perfectly steady. She believed she was winning. Harlan watched her pour. He did not drink. "We are here," Harlan said, his voice a low rumble that cut through their performance. "To discuss the future. The trial is set for January 6th, but I have always believed that accounts should be settled before a new year begins." Diane clasped her hands. "Oh, yes, Daddy, a fresh start. That is all we want." Harlan gestured to the triple-locked box in the center of the table. "This box contains the foundation of our family's trust, but it is locked, and it requires a consensus." He reached into his jacket and produced 3 small, identical slips of thick cardstock and 3 heavy gold-plated pens. "I want each of you," he said, "to write down one single sentence, your definition of minimum fairness. What is the one non-negotiable principle upon which our family, and its finances, should be built? Write it down. We will put them in the box, and we will see if we have a consensus." Diane looked ecstatic. This was a test of love, a test of loyalty, and she knew. She was the only one who truly understood family. She took the pen. She did not hesitate. She wrote her sentence, folded the card, and smiled at Harlan. A beatific, maternal smile. Brittany chewed her lip. She was thinking. She was calculating. What did he want to hear? What was the right answer? She scribbled something, hesitated, then folded it quickly. Harlan looked at me. "Vivian." I took the pen. My hand did not shake. I knew exactly what this was. It was not a test of love. It was a binding statement. I wrote my sentence. I folded it. "Excellent," Harlan said. He slid the box to the center. "Diane, please." She slid her card into a slot on the top. "Brittany." She did the same. "Vivian." I, too, slid my card into the box. "Now," Harlan said. "We see." He produced 3 intricate, old-fashioned brass keys. He inserted them, one by one, into the 3 locks. He turned them. Click, click, click. He lifted the heavy lid. Diane was leaning forward, her face bright with anticipation, ready for her words to be praised. Harlan turned the box and held it open for all of us to see. It was completely, absolutely empty. Diane's smile froze. I do not understand. Where are the cards?" "Oh, the cards are not in the box," Harlan said. He gestured to a painting on the wall, a dark landscape. It flickered. It was not a painting. It was a high-resolution monitor, and on the screen, in their own handwriting, were their sentences. Diane Long family must always be put above all else. Brittany Long. Everyone deserves a second chance. Vivian Long, return each name to its owner. A small document scanner, Harlan said conversationally, is built into the table, a wonderful piece of technology. It copies, it analyzes, and it saves. What? What is this? Diane stammered. Self-correction removed the stutter. Diane stammered. This is a trick. No, Harlan said. This is an affidavit. You have just given me your sworn philosophical testimony, your closing arguments, before the trial. Diane, you believe family is a shield to hide behind. Brittany, you believe second chances are something you are owed. And Vivian, she just wants her name back. As he spoke, the oak doors slid open. A man in a suit, Harlan's assistant, Mr. Allen, walked in. He was holding a single, manila envelope. Mr. Whitaker, Allen said, this was just delivered by the forensic audio team. Right on time, Harlan said. Diane was white. Brittany looked like she was going to be sick. What? What audio? Brittany whispered. We have all been busy since the hearing. My dear, Harlan said, Maya's team has been auditing your finances. My team. We have been auditing your methods. For instance, your boyfriend's car, the one used to vandalize Vivian's. Allen opened the envelope and placed a small digital audio player on the table. This, Harlan said, was recovered from a cell phone tower dump. It is a recording, from the night of the 29th, a call between you, Brittany, and your young man. He pressed play. The room was silent, and then Brittany's voice, tinny and sharp. No, it is easy. You just get a blank SIM. You call the provider. You say you are Vivian Long. You say you lost your phone. You have her social, her date of birth. Mom has all of it. You port the number. You swap the SIM. And then all her bank codes, her two-factor, the little OTP texts, they all come to my phone. We can drain everything before she even knows she's been locked out. A male voice mumbled. That is a crime. Brittany's voice, hissing. It is not a crime if it is family. It is our money. Harlan pressed, stop. The silence in the room was a living thing. Diane surged to her feet. No, this is fake. You faked this. You are trying to frame her. This is illegal. Actually, a new voice said, it is perfectly admissible. The door to a second private room, one connected to ours, opened. Maya Coltrane stepped out. She was holding her laptop. That recording, Maya said, her voice crisp and clear. Along with your illegally recorded settlement negotiation from my office and your handwritten statements of intent from tonight, have just been compiled into an emergency motion. I filed it with the court's overnight electronic system. She checked her watch. It is now 12:01 a.m., January 1st. It is the first filing of the new year. It proves conspiracy to commit wire fraud. It proves a pattern of criminal intent. It makes the January 6th hearing a formality. Diane sank back into her chair. She was breathing through her mouth. Harlan looked at her. He looked at Brittany. The trap was now finally, closed. He reached into his jacket one last time. He produced a single, folded document. And his pen. But, Harlan said, I am a man who believes in settling accounts. This is my revised will, the one based on Addendum K, the one that disinherits you both, completely, the one that leaves everything, the house, the assets, all of it, to Vivian. He unfolded it. He placed it on the table. He uncapped his pen. I am going to sign it, he said. Right here, tonight, it is already witnessed. It just needs my signature. He looked at them. His eyes were not angry. They were just done. Unless you have 1 hour until the clock strikes midnight, my offer of a civil settlement, the one you spat on in Ms. Coltrane's office, is back on the table, full confession, full voluntary repayment plan, and you do it, now, before I sign this." He held the pen over the signature line. "The clock," he said, "is running." Diane stared at the will. She stared at the pen. She looked at Brittany, her eyes wide with terror and rage. Brittany just stared at the audio player on the table, her face completely, utterly blank. The grand clock in the restaurant's hallway chimed. It was 11 o'clock. They sat in silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Harlan waited. He looked at Diane. He looked at Brittany. And then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he put the cap back on his pen. Click. The new year did not begin with a celebration. It began with a signing. On the morning of January 1st, while the rest of the city slept off the night's festivities, I sat in a notary's office in a silent, empty downtown building. The room was stark, furnished only with a heavy mahogany desk and the state seal. It was me, Maya Coltrane, Harlan, and a very serious-looking notary public. Harlan had not been bluffing. He had capped his pen at the chop house, paid the bill in cash, and left Diane and Brittany sitting in the wreckage of their own failed gamble. They had chosen silence, believing, even in the end, that he would not, could not, abandon his own blood. They had fundamentally misunderstood the man they were dealing with. He was not a father or a grandfather in that moment. He was a grantor, and they were defaulting beneficiaries. Now, in the cold, bright light of New Year's Day, the consequences were being notarized. On the desk between us sat the 2 documents from the night before the Whitaker Living Trust, and the blue file labeled Addendum K. Harlan looked at the notary, a woman who seemed entirely unfazed by the gravity of the room. "Please open and read the designated section of the addendum, for the record." The notary, who had been pre-briefed, opened the blue file. "This is Addendum K of the last will and testament of Harlan Whitaker. The clause in question states, should any beneficiary engage in acts of financial coercion, emotional manipulation, or reputational leverage, said beneficiary shall be disinherited to the fullest extent of the law. Their portion shall be reduced to 0. Harlan looked at me. His eyes were not warm. They were not celebratory. They were the eyes of an auditor closing a successful file. "You have 3 things. Vivian," he said, his voice quiet but echoing in the wood-paneled room. 3 things they could not touch, no matter how hard they tried. They came for your name, they came for your career, and they came for your spine. They failed to take any of them." He turned to the notary. "I am ready to sign." He took his pen, the same one from the restaurant, and uncapped it. He signed the revised Whitaker Trust first. Maya, as my counsel, summarized the changes for the record. The amendment, effective immediately, designates Vivian Long as the sole, primary beneficiary and future trustee. Diane Long and Brittany Long are hereby removed as beneficiaries. "Not removed," Harlan interjected, his voice sharp. "Suspended. Their status is suspended until such time as they have made full, 100% restitution for all funds taken, as determined by the independent audit. They must also provide a certificate of completion from a mandatory court-approved financial literacy course." He was not just disinheriting them, he was giving them a path back, but a path so steep, so arduous. He knew they would never take it. It was a life sentence of accountability. "Furthermore," Maya continued, "the clawback provision is fully activated. All funds distributed from the trust and proven to be used for non-qualified charitable or medical purposes, such as the art auction handbag and the spa weeks, are to be immediately recalled and deducted from any future potential probationary distributions." Harlan capped his pen. He slid a second document across the desk. This one was a property deed. "And this," he said. "This," Maya said, "is a conditional quitclaim deed. Mr. Whitaker is transferring ownership of the Cedar Ridge family home, to Ms. Vivian Long. My breath caught. The house, the one I had been locked out of on Christmas Eve. Harlan looked at me, his gaze unyielding. It comes with conditions. They are binding. He pointed to the text. You will read them, Vivian. I looked at the deed. The legal language was ironclad. The property, I read aloud, is transferred to Vivian Long as her sole and separate asset. It is not, and shall never be, considered a family asset. It shall not be used as a family fund. It cannot be used as collateral, mortgaged, or leveraged for the benefit of any person other than the grantee. Vivian Long, any attempt to do so will void the transfer and the property will revert to the Whitaker Trust. He had not just given me a house. He had given me a fortress. He had given me the one thing I had never had, a home with rules. My rules. He signed the deed. The notary affixed her seal with a heavy final thud. The trial on January 6th was almost an anticlimax. It was a formality, just as Maya had predicted. The courtroom was packed. Diane, in her desperation, had rallied the flying monkeys. My aunt from Ohio was there, my cousins, all whispering in the back, staring at me with a mixture of hatred and awe. They had come to see the ungrateful daughter get her comeuppance. They were about to be very disappointed. Judge Alameen was not in a celebratory mood. She had read the emergency filing from New Year's Day. Mr. Hayes, she said to Diane's terrified lawyer, we are here for the full trial, but I have on my desk a motion filed by Ms. Coltrane's team. It contains disturbing new evidence. Your Honor, Maya stood. We have provided the court with sworn affidavits, metadata analysis of the fraudulent POA, the original UCC-1 filing, and, most critically, new evidence. This evidence, she held up the drive, includes a recording of the respondent, Ms. Brittany Long, actively planning to commit wire fraud by porting the petitioner's phone number to gain access to her bank accounts and two-factor authentication codes, a plan she referred to as not a crime if it is family. The gallery went silent. My aunt from Ohio stopped whispering. We also have, Maya continued, a new, legally binding revision of the Whitaker Trust, signed on January 1st, which confirms the grantor's own judgment and activates the Addendum K clause. Pending this court's ruling, the evidence is no longer merely overwhelming. Your Honor, it is absolute. Mr. Hayes stood. He was pale. Your Honor, in light of my clients, we do not contest the motion. They were not fighting. They had no ground left to stand on. Judge Alameen's face was thunderous. She looked at Diane and Brittany. You did not contest because you cannot contest. The evidence is absolute. This court's ruling is final. The gavel did not even come down yet. She delivered the verdict like a sentence. The injunction against Diane Long and Brittany Long is made permanent. The Long Household Emergency Fund is to be permanently dissolved. All assets, including the restitution of the $40,000, are to be returned to the petitioner. This court further orders a full and binding repayment of all funds proven by the audit to be fraudulent. A number I see is in excess of $200,000. She then looked directly at Brittany. Ms. Brittany Long, your actions, your plan to commit wire fraud, are criminal. This court is, for now, treating this as a civil matter, but I am ordering you placed under full financial receivership. You are forbidden from opening any new line of credit, any loan, or any bank account without the express, written permission of a court-appointed trustee. Your name, in the financial world, no longer belongs to you. It was over. The gavel fell. Bang, but Harlan was not finished. As the court devolved into chaos, as Mr. Hayes tried to explain the ruling to a shell-shocked Diane, Harlan stood up from the front row. He walked to the center aisle, directly in front of the gallery, in front of all the relatives who had come to scorn me. He reached into his pocket. He did not look at Diane. He did not look at Brittany. He looked at me. As I stood by Maya's table, he held up a single, old, brass key. The key to the Cedar Ridge house. He walked over to me, and in the dead silence of the courtroom, in front of the judge, the bailiff, and our entire, broken family, he placed the key in my hand. It was not a gift. It was a coronation. It was a public and final judgment of morality. "No," Diane shrieked. It was not a word. It was the sound of a soul being ripped out. "No, my house, mine." She lunged. She lunged for the key. For me. Her fingers curled like claws. Her face a mask of pure, primal rage. The court bailiff, who had been expecting this, caught her. He grabbed her by the arms. "That is enough, ma'am." "Order." Judge Alamine's gavel hammered down. A rapid-fire bang, bang, bang. "Order in this court, bailiff. Remove Ms. Long if she cannot control herself." Diane was restrained, held back by the officer. She was not a matriarch. She was not a victim. She was just a woman, screaming in a courtroom, having lost everything. Brittany did not move. She just turned her back to all of us. I saw her shoulders hitch. Her hand went to her wrist, to the diamond tennis bracelet, the one she had pawned and repurchased with my name. Its sparkle, which she had flashed so proudly on Christmas Eve, now seemed to hang on her like a shackle, a heavy, glittering weight. Diane finally went silent. She just stood there, frozen, held by the bailiff, her mouth open, but no words coming out. There was nothing left to say. I stood there, the heavy brass key digging into my palm. I closed my fingers around it. It was warm. I looked at the oak doors of the courtroom, and I thought of the oak door of the house, the one that had been slammed in my face on Christmas Eve, the one with the brass chain. That door was now mine. I took a deep, steady breath. The air felt clean. It felt new. I looked over at Harlan. He was watching me. He had not moved. He saw the key in my hand. He saw the look on my face. And for the first time, he was not the grantor, not the auditor, not the strategist. He was, for 1 second, my grandfather. He gave a single, slow, satisfied nod. "You just got your name back," he said. "Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment below with your location. Share your thoughts, subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it a huge hype boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.